also for giving up so much of their time for me. And also, even though he's not here today, I'd like to thank Dr. John Morley, who was my third South African preceptor and who was himself a pioneering home birther on the garden route in his day. So, starting in 2007 and ending in 2011, I completed all my required births, 40 of them, and at least half of these have to be in an out-of-hospital setting for the NARM certification. I also completed all the necessary prenatals, postnatals, newborn exams, and then I moved on to studying and performing many practical skills, including pap smears and lab work with Dr. Estia Oendal, who's a fantastically enlightened obstetrician in the Knysna area. And during this time, I also began working in my rural community, helping women in labour, driving them to hospital and accompanying them throughout their labours or helping them at home. And my husband and I have since set up an NGO and a women's group in our community, and it would be the realisation of a very long-held dream for me to set up a birth centre and a pre- and postnatal clinic in my own area along the same lines as Bus Fair Babies. Along the way also having been inspired by the fantastic work that Karen's been doing. My special interest is nutrition, and I've been an organic permaculture farmer for 12 years. I believe that there's a great deal that is underestimated within the realm of nutrition, concerned not only with improving the health of the body, but also with improving health. Numerous studies have shown a direct link between the consumption of dead, empty food and the psychological and behavioural disorders, particularly in children. My family and I have really developed massive, beautiful organic gardens and orchards, which I hope will eventually become the cornerstone of feeding and educating people, and also an integral part of the clinic that I want to establish. So, back to the story though. When once my portfolio was complete, I submitted it to NARM and began preparing for my practical and written exams, as well as for my neonatal resuscitation certification, which I intended to take at the farm in Tennessee. I had already attended a midwife's assistance course there in 2007, where I was lucky enough to attend a lecture by the fabulous Ina May Gaskin herself, who was my very first birth guru. The written exam was to be an 8-hour exam to be held at the annual Mana conference in Niagara Falls in Canada. And so my plans are all great in theory, but after finally completing all the planning and the pioneering and the slogging and the studying and the birthing, mine and my poor long-suffering husband's financial resources had finally run out. So there was no way I was going to get to Canada and the US and be able to stay there for 2 months and write and pay for and complete all those exams unless I became exceptionally creative about it. So the idea for the Miss Delivery Cycle Tour was born. And since we had a midwifery conference, I do have to tell you it was a water birth in the shower while I was washing my hair one morning. This idea came to me of a sponsored cycle ride of 200 kilometers to help me raise funds to be able to get overseas to write the exams and hopefully finally qualify as a midwife. So bear in mind though that this idea was conceived in June, so to speak. The ride was planned for the first week in August, and I had to be in the US by September, so it was going to get pretty fun. And in this time, I had to train to get fit enough to ride 200 kilometers, organize awareness, publicity, and sponsorship for my cause, set up a website with a great deal of help from my family and friends, and study 4 years worth of work for my final exam, all the while never really knowing if I actually would be able to raise enough money to go. It was a real test of faith. And it does tell you something about my incredible helpers and supporters along the way, to let you know that in the end we raised just enough to cover nearly everything, except the accommodation costs. But that also worked out because I ended up dad sitting someone's 95-year-old dad in return for accommodation at the farm, so it worked out quickly. So by the skin of my teeth, I made it to the US, wrote my exams, which I studied for endlessly, feeling somewhat under pressure to succeed now, as you can imagine. And in between studying and doing my neonatal resus, I was also blessed enough to assist prenatally and at a birth with 2 of the original farm midwives, Sharon and Carol, who were an awesome team to work with. You can imagine they've been working together as midwives for 40 years. So it was pretty seamless. I returned from the US in late November 2011 to await my final results and was thrilled to hear in December that I had passed and I was finally a certified professional midwife. Last year I spent 7 months in the UK working with newborns, and I've now returned to set up a practice with Sister Anne-Marie Duplessis, who's also here today, in the back there, hiding away, and also to further my community practice. My aim, as I've said, is to eventually set up a birth and wellness centre and to serve the community in all areas. The centre would hopefully eventually be registered as an out-of-country clinical site where students doing the NARM course would be able to come to obtain experience. Eventually, the plan would be for the NARM exam to be written here in South Africa, enabling many more students to potentially become highly skilled direct entry midwives. And that is what I think that we as healthcare professionals in South Africa should be thinking about. Currently, as we all know, our maternal infant healthcare is in a dire situation, as reflected in just a couple of these newspaper articles which I have here. Couple to sue after baby born disabled, woman lay in labour unattended, bleeding as nurses watch TV. It's a great one. Negligence causing brain damage in babies. Not only are negligent hospital staff costing the country millions, but they're also causing otherwise healthy babies to be born with severe brain damage and cerebral palsy. Vrou swanger met dooie fetus huis toe gestuur. It's an awful story. And then, of course, in the clinics too, occasionally. Police protect staff from residents at clinic where 2 babies died, and it goes on in the article about how they were ignored by the clinic staff and 2 of the babies died. I'll leave these at the table at the back so that you can read them at your leisure if you're interested. Not only do we read about horrors such as these in articles like this, but as birth professionals, I'm pretty sure that we've all encountered this in one form or another, either in our training or in the course of our exposure to many hospital births. Surely then, the most fundamental issue that should be looked at is the training of midwives in the state system. And Lorna brought up something very succinctly yesterday when she spoke about fresh, new, young midwives coming out of college and telling women to lie down on their backs. That's clearly what they're obviously still being trained to do. Most fortunately, there is an increasing awareness being brought to the subject, and there was actually an excellent article by Barbara Hanrahan in here, which illustrates that accountability for maternal health care in South Africa is becoming a focus, and there's places where you can report disrespectful treatment of women in hospitals. There's a whole called the White Ribbon Alliance. So there can hardly be a better time than now for the South African healthcare authorities and the South African Nursing Council to overhaul their current midwifery training. Amongst many other things, the policy on immediate cord clamping, for example, which seems positively dinosaurian in the light of new evidence-based research. It makes the best sense for them to embrace the new and growing wave of direct entry midwifery students and to collaborate with them to provide the best possible care to mums and babies. The women who have followed my lead and are now training for their CPMs have completely educated themselves. They're not costing the government a cent to train, and each and every one of them want to give something back to their communities in one way or another. It seems to me to be a good suggestion to add to a range of possible solutions to South Africa's maternal and infant healthcare crisis. Other countries make use of the CPM credential because this credential is legally defensible and psychometrically sound. It's also been proven to 1. Reduce regulatory administrative tasks and staff time, 2. Eliminate costs with creating and maintaining a psychometrically valid examination, and 3. Provide a streamlined mechanism for licensure and relicensure. Surely, in this fast-moving age, there must be a way for the South African Nursing Council to firstly develop a protocol for acceptance of direct entry midwives, and secondly, and most importantly in my opinion, to bring into their own training a new awareness of the multifaceted sacred passage that is birth.